All right, if you're anything like me, you hate running out of food on a trip. It's like a big fear, and so I'm a big fan of snacks during an adventure, and one of my absolute favorite go-to snacks are wonderful pistachios. You may be familiar with pistachios and the brand Wonderful Pistachios, but if you're not, they are one of the highest protein nuts out there. 1 ounce serving of Wonderful Pistachios is 6 grams of protein. That's 10% of your daily value. It also includes 9 essential amino acids, and they come with a ton of different flavors, varieties. There's a spicy version, there's lightly salted, there's no salted, there's so many, and every time I go on an adventure, I'm not even lying, I take an entire bag with me. And what's cool too, I love having the Wonderful Pistachio in shell, because then that almost gives me something to do and focus on as I'm paddling or biking through the really monotonous parts of the adventure. Every great adventure is going to have plenty of boring moments, and it's nice to have something to do and also something that is giving you some fuel, like Wonderful Pistachios. So they're one of my favorite adventure snacks, favorite road trip snacks, and definitely leave me feeling better than a lot of other snacks you can turn to. So if you want to learn more about how to fuel your next adventure with Wonderful Pistachios, go to wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. I live in the incredibly hot Florida sun, and I end up going with a lot of friends to paddle and bike and hike, and it is hugely dehydrating. And it is so important to have very convenient and accessible hydration options, something more than water, which is why I'm a huge fan of Liquid IV. It is so easy, it's convenient to tear, open one of their packets, pour it into my water, shake it up, and enjoy it, and know that I am getting what I need for fast hydration. It tastes better than just water by itself. And like I said, incredibly lightweight. It has some pretty fun flavors like popsicle firecracker and rainbow sherbet. I know hydration is important for any adventure, not just when you're in somewhere hot, but anytime you're sweating, that needs to be an essential part of your adventure planning process. So if you want to add Liquid IV to your adventure equipment and make sure you stay hydrated on your next adventure, go to liquidiv.com and use the code ASP at checkout for 20% off your very first order of Liquid IV. Again, 20% off your first order for better hydration. Go to liquidiv.com and use the code ASP at checkout. Hey folks, welcome to the Adventure Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Mason Gravely. Today we're talking to Bernadette McDonald. She is an alumni of the show. She's been on the show before talking about a winter 8,000, climbing the 8,000 meter peaks, which are in the Himalayan mountains during the winter, some of those stories. Well, today is almost an evolution of that story. It's called Alpine Rising, Sherpas, Baltis, and the triumph of local climbers in the greater ranges. And it's basically the history of how Sherpas started getting involved in mountaineering in the Himalayas, but also how they were often overlooked. Those who were helping these oftentimes Western climbers reach these summits to glory. Well, Sherpas were often not even named in a lot of these expeditions, even though they were doing all the work and obviously doing more work a lot of the times than these climbers by carrying a bunch of other gear and assisting with navigation and sometimes rescuing people literally without any sort of mention. And so Bernadette set out to help set that story straight and bring more attention and talk about the shift in that culture where in the 21st century, we're seeing a lot more local climbing teams do some first ascents and some really amazing challenges, which has been awesome to see, and also ownership of the entire Himalayan mountaineering industry being more owned by those who are local to those mountains, not by Western companies. Probably a couple times a year, we check in on what's going on in the Himalayas. I know for a lot of y'all that listen, that might be the pinnacle of your adventure hopes and aspirations is to eventually climb one of the tallest peaks in the world. Maybe it is even Everest. We've had a lot of Everest summiters on this show over the years. And like we said, Bernadette's an author, so her book, Alpine Rising, we're going to do a giveaway. It's out now, but before we do that, I do want to go ahead and let the winner of last week with the episode with Dion Leonard, Finding Gobi, amazing story about an ultra runner who came across this stray dog, became basically the best of friends, and Gobi's story of being lost again and found again. And Gobi's the name of the dog. But that, if you haven't listened to that, go listen to that. But the book, Finding Gobi, we're going to do a giveaway, and we had a bunch of people reach out wanting this one. And so the winner of Finding Gobi from last week is Nick Esposti. And Nick, if I didn't say your last name right, my apologies. But Nick Esposti, congratulations. Just reply back to that message with your address, and I'll get a book right to you as soon as possible. And for this episode with Bernadette McDonald's book, Alpine Rising, if you are interested in a copy of this book, please reach out letting me know that. You can either email me, mason@adventuresportspodcast.com. You can DM me on Facebook or Instagram. Just look up Adventure Sports Podcast. Heck, if you got my cell phone number, you can text me, but I'm not sharing that on the air. And let me know what this book would mean to you. It's an interesting book. It's about the history of this stuff. And if this is a subject you're particularly interested in, make sure to let me know that. Even though the giveaway is totally randomized, reach out in the next 48 hours, and you will be entered to win Alpine Rising. But all right, let's go ahead and dive into Bernadette's story. All right, folks, welcome to the Adventure Sports Podcast. Today, I warned you a few weeks ago when we revisited Bernadette's episode that we would be having Bernadette on again, and so we want to welcome you. How you doing?
Oh, I'm good. I've just recently recovered from COVID, which I caught while I was on a book tour. So I'm feeling pretty perky now that I'm feeling recovered.
Is it the first time having COVID?
This is the first time. I know it's a rare situation, but yeah, it hit pretty hard.
Gosh, I'm sorry to hear it. It's out of style now. So
apparently, yeah.
I'm sorry that it was bad. So it wasn't one of those where you didn't show signs. I've had it twice, and the first time was okay. The second time was difficult.
Yeah. Well, the problem was I was on a book tour, so I had to isolate in a hotel room for 5 days. And that wasn't very much fun.
No, away from home, all that.
Yes, exactly.
Well, last time we talked to you, you were coming at us from Banff. Are you in Banff now? Where are you coming from?
No, not now. I'm in southern British Columbia right now in the Okanagan Valley. We have a little farm down here, and we grow grapes. And so, yeah, I just came in actually from the garden. You don't want to see my hands. They're absolutely filthy. But I did wash my face and comb my hair.
Well, we are not on video, so that's nice. No kidding. So
I didn't have to bother.
You didn't. I tell people, I should say that. I make it more clear. It's this is an audio aspect. People are listening while they're out on adventures, while they're driving to and from the mountains. So. It's better that way for me, and also a lot of times for the guests, because who knows where they're coming from. But so you grow grapes. Do you sell them, or is it just a hobby, or is this a business?
No, we do sell them. We sell them to a winery just up the road from here, and this particular year is kind of new territory for everyone in this valley, though. Because last winter, I'm sure you wouldn't have heard about this, but last winter there was a really bad cold stretch here, which is unusual for the Okanagan. And anyway, a lot of vineyards have been damaged, and ours is one of them. So we're waiting to see what happens.
Oh my God! As far as like government assistance or something to try to help make up, or waiting to see how the crops turn out.
Yeah, well, we have insurance on our crops, so. Yeah. We will get something out of it, but it's actually almost catastrophic for this valley, because it was just an unbelievably long cold stretch, minus 24 to minus 27 Celsius for, I think it was 40 some hours, which is too long really for vines. But yeah, so that's everybody's just sitting around waiting to see what happens to their vines, and we are too.
This is not something I expected to talk about, but this is so interesting because I didn't know this.
Oh, no, I know. Sorry. It's not exactly adventure oriented, but
No, it is. It is because so many of us have these lives that we live on adventure. And in your case, the books that you write and the stories that you bring to life. But we also have these other sides of our lives, which, I feel like without talking about it, a lot of people might assume, oh, this is all Bernadette does is live, these adventure stories and write about them. And this is your whole life. However, for a lot of us, including the people that, have an entire career based on adventure, there is this other side that's just totally detached in a lot of ways. And personally, I find that really refreshing and relatable, and also really interesting why and how you manage both. But so it sounds like maybe the book writing in your career, telling these stories, this is a nice counterbalance with working with your hands and seeing something you produce out in the world. I know a book is like that, but this is something that grows, something that's on land and exists out there. That has to fulfill a side of you that the writing doesn't.
Yeah, it does. I mean, I'm actually quite a physical person, so I like to do a lot of the things that I write about, not at the same level, of course, that the people who I'm writing about do. But yeah, living on a piece of land and growing stuff, and it's quite fulfilling, and it's a nice balance. I think I could say it's a nice balance to the writing, because the writing is very cerebral, and working in the garden and the vineyard is it's just kind of grunt work, really, but it feels good.
Oh yeah. I was working on some closet doors this morning, and it was just probably going to be the most satisfying part of my day is painting some doors, just because I see it, I work on it, I get the tools out, and now and then also these conversations are so important. But well, tell us about. I do want to hear where did this idea for Alpine Rising come about? Because it seems from your other books kind of a unique perspective, a unique story, trying to bring to light a different aspect of things that often get overlooked.
Yeah. Well, I think the idea for this book actually came from one of the characters in my last book, which you mentioned, Winter 8000. So when I was writing Winter 8000, of course, I was focusing on high altitude climbers who specialize in winter, and it's a niche group, no question. Luckily, most high altitude climbers don't specialize in winter. But one of the climbers that I did interview was Ali Sadpara from Pakistan, and as you know, Ali was an incredible high altitude climber, and he did a number of winter expeditions with 4 teams, mostly Polish teams, and they're of course the experts on winter. And one of those expeditions that he did was actually with an international team, and it was to Nanga Parbat, and they actually did the first winter ascent of Nanga Parbat. And so what inspired me to write Alpine Rising was spending time with Ali Sadpara and learning about what he contributed to that particular ascent, but then watching as the publicity machine started rolling, watching how Ali was in a way not sidelined completely, but he wasn't given the attention that I thought he deserved. And it just started me thinking about climbers from, well, at that point it was climbers from Pakistan, and just wondering how they were acknowledged, I guess, in the history writing of high altitude climbing. And as I started doing the research, reading old books, reports, Alpine Club journals, and all this kind of stuff, it seemed to be a kind of a consistent story where the Western climbers got most of the glory, and the local climbers got very little. And so it made me think this is something that needed to be written about.
Well, in research, I'm sure you began to see, like you said, you began to see that these were not fair, what was getting reported. And so it's probably hard to find stuff that isn't there. information that isn't there. So how did you begin to fill those gaps in that were just not even in the reports when they happened? What do you even do? How do you approach that?
Yeah, well, that's a very good point. I mean, first of all, you read as many reports on the same climb as you can get your hands on, just to see if somebody had
mentioned somebody
somebody wrote about or said something about who was actually there and who did stuff. So, but certainly you're absolutely right. For the early expeditions, it was really difficult to actually, in some cases, even figure out what the names of the climbers were. And there's lots of situations where the names are, well, there aren't names. It's just 7 Sherpas or 12 Baltis or something like that. The 16 Haps. And as of course that was part of the process for me, was trying to see, is this a changing thing? Are we evolving into a different kind of climbing community where everybody gets acknowledgement, or are we still kind of in the dark ages? And part of what was interesting was seeing how high altitude climbing has evolved over actually now centuries. And how Western climbers, how people who are writing those narratives are starting to acknowledge, not 100%, but increasingly so, acknowledge the local climbers who actually helped make it happen.
Walk through with listeners kind of the standard expedition setup for some of these bigger climbs, some of these first ascents. What are the amount of people we're talking about versus the amount of people that are reported? Is it usually 1 or 2 people, Westerners, that get talked about, and there's dozens of supporting Sherpas and maybe other Westerners too that were supporting? Like what did you see as like a standard expedition setup?
Mm-hmm. Well, I wish I could. It's because there's nothing really standard. But so there are small, independent, kind of futuristic, I could say, expeditions that do hire local people to help them, but very few. And partially because they're usually on a relatively low budget, and also because they wish to climb unassisted. They want to do their own thing. So these are small expeditions that are doing sometimes very difficult things. But there are lots, and most expeditions these days consist of not even so much climbers as clients. So these are people who are going to the high mountains to climb them, to reach the summits, but they are doing so with 100% support of local climbers. And in that case, it could be, on one expedition, there could be 4 or 6 clients. So Westerners, not always Westerners. They could be Chinese, they could be North American, French, whatever. And then there would be an entire army of people supporting them. These would be people who are helicopter pilots now, because there's a lot of this is being done by helicopter. Porters, cooks, people who icefall doctors, if it's on Everest. These are climbers who put in the infrastructure through the icefall in order to make it relatively safe to go through. People who set up the camps, people who carry the oxygen, who carry the food, who cook the food, and finally the actual guides who literally go in front of, and sometimes in front of and behind the clients to get them to the tops. So it's a huge infrastructure and lots of local climbers who make this happen.
As you began to research this and discover, some of those other overlooked aspects of these historic expeditions, was it worse than you imagined, or better than you imagined it being, like, as far as the amount of people overlooked or the amount of work that was overlooked? Was it just jaw-dropping, or was it, no, this is what I expected?
It was pretty jaw-dropping, especially in the early days. I think there was just so much suffering and really so much sacrifice. I mean, and I'm talking about, life and death kind of sacrifice. So many of the local climbers ended up with terrible injuries, lots of frostbite. It was jaw-droppingly sad, actually, to learn about some of these people. And of course, I didn't get to speak with most of these people personally because they're long gone. But their children are alive. Not all, but there are quite a few of their children that are still alive, living in Nepal or India or in Pakistan. And, they have pretty compelling stories.
What was maybe, I don't know if you can tell us, maybe one of the more egregious situations or something maybe from the book or something that didn't make the book that could kind of paint a picture for folks?
Yeah. I wrote quite a lot about K2 because there have been so many expeditions to K2. And one of the stories that bothered me, I guess, the most was the first ascent of K2. And, not to pick on any particular team, but it just so happened this way that it was an Italian team. And it's, the mountain had been attempted many times with lots of good things that happened and lots of bad things that happened, but it still hadn't been climbed. So when the Italians showed up, they had local Balti climbers helping them. When it came time to carry oxygen to the two climbers who had been chosen as the summit climbers, it was one Italian and one Balti who carried the oxygen up to the two summit climbers. Walter Bonatti, the famous Walter Bonatti, was the Italian climber who was asked to carry oxygen to the two summit climbers, and he asked Amir Mehdi, who was a local climber, to help him. So they did, and they delivered the oxygen, but it was too late in the day for them to descend. So they ended up doing this high altitude bivouac, and of course, the inevitable happened. A storm moved in, and they had a horrific night. As a result, they both got down, they both survived, but Amir Mehdi had horrific frostbite. He lost all his toes. He lost all his toes. He lost part of one foot, and he could no longer work again. So his life, as a result of that expedition, was obscurity, poverty, pain, shame, because he wanted to climb it too, and just misery. And the two climbers who got to the summit, of course, they were national heroes, international heroes, icons, Italian icons, and they had a really great life following that ascent. And I sort of contrast that particular situation with what happened just a very few years ago when the 10 Nepali climbers made the first winter ascent. And it's just amazing to see how things have evolved for local climbers. Now, in this case, they were Nepali, not Pakistani climbers, but these guys went to the mountain not as employees. They went as individual climbers on their own dime. They paid their way there, and they climbed together as a team. And their situation was so different. I mean, none of them came down with terrible frostbite injuries. They reached the summit. They sang the national anthem on the top. I mean, it was really kind of a great story. And it's an incredible contrast to what happened back in 1954 to poor Amir Mehdi.
As you researched, did you come across any mountaineers or stories who were telling this story early on or trying to get the word out there about how unfair this was, or the unsung heroes? Did you see anybody who was maybe leading that charge early on, but just, it would take decades, almost a century, for that to change?
Yes. One of the early climbers, Dr. Charles Housden, an American climber, who I actually got to know very well because I wrote his biography quite a few books back. But I got to know Charlie really well, and he talked a lot about his expeditions, in particular his K2 expeditions, and the friendships that he formed, one in particular, to Pasang Kikuli, and how devastated he was when Pasang lost his life on K2. And Charlie felt very strongly that that Pasang Kikuli hadn't been treated fairly, and that he had been taken advantage of, and that he should never have been in the position that he was when he lost his life. So I would say that Charlie Houston was an early supporter and acknowledger, and he of local climbers, and he valued them greatly, particularly for that time, which was in the late 30s.
Did that come across when you first talked to him about the book you wrote before?
Yes, it did. Yeah, he had held a lot of, sort of anger, I would say, over all those years about what happened to what he called him his dear friend.
Let's take a quick message break and hear from the folks that help make this show possible. I love a good deal as much as the next person, but I'm not going to crawl through a bed of hot coals just to save a few bucks. It has to be relatively easy, no hoops, no BS. So when Mint Mobile said it was easy to get wireless for $15 a month with the purchase of a 3-month plan, I called BS on them. Well, turns out it really is that easy to get wireless for $15 a month. The longest part of the process was the time I spent on hold waiting to break up with my old provider. It is super easy to switch your wireless carrier to Mint Mobile. They got a great website, easy to purchase, get your phone activated. If you're looking to work with Mint Mobile, go to mintmobile.com/ASP. And you'll see how to sign up for one of their 3-month plans that are only $15 a month, including the unlimited plan. All plans come with high-speed data and unlimited talk and text on the nation's largest 5G network. Find out how easy it is to switch to Mint Mobile and get 3 months on premium wireless service for $15 a month. To get this new customer offer and your new 3-month premium wireless plan for $15 a month, go to mintmobile.com/ASP. That's mintmobile.com/ASP. $45 upfront payment required, equivalent to $15 a month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Speed slower at 40 gigs on unlimited plan. Additional tax, fees, and restrictions apply. See Mint Mobile for details. Hey folks, this episode is brought to you by, the state of Colorado. If you didn't know, this show was born and raised in Colorado. So many of our guests and stories take place there. So many of my adventures take place there. And we hope these episodes inspire you to seek an exciting trip of your own this summer in the beautiful state of Colorado. I was just there in Aspen, went hiking. It was absolutely breathtaking. And the mountains get a lot of attention, but there's culinary adventures, outdoor adventures, entertainment and scenic outdoor venues from music festivals and film festivals and all sorts of festivals. The state has it all. Experience the thrill of mountain biking along riverside trails or hop aboard a train for a railroad adventure. It has charming mountain and historic towns and cities, historic hotels, dude ranches, and like I said before, amazing cuisine, Michelin star level dining. And on those chilly summer nights, relax in one of the hot springs. Let Colorado awaken your spirit of adventure and explore all the possibilities that the state has to offer at visitcolorado.com and uncover the magic and start planning your getaway today. Visitcolorado.com. So, one of the stereotypes when you get older, you start really getting into birds, and it is very true for me. My wife and I are like, is that a cardinal? Is that a mockingbird? A blue jay, whatever it is, I'm really getting into birds. And what I'm very excited about is the new Feather Snap, which is a Wi-Fi enabled smart bird feeder that blends the best of technology and nature. It's this unique dual bird feeder that helps attract more species with built-in solar panels and keeps your camera battery going strong to charge the camera that's on there, and then it sends it to your phone and also identifies the birds that are going to your feeder. Me and the kids are absolutely loving it, and we've been really surprised by what's come to our bird feeder. Just for transparency, I got my mom a trail camera last year so she could see all the animals in her backyard, and the first night we saw a bear a bear. We didn't even know there were bears. I mean, we knew, but we didn't know they were that close. And this takes it to a whole nother level because it's for people who love birds and want to understand what's in their backyard. And I think it's an awesome gift idea. It's like one of those things a lot of people wouldn't get for themselves, but it's such a cool thing to give people that they can really get excited about. It's the gift that keeps on giving. And it's just, I'm always a huge fan of bringing more of nature in and getting people more excited about, you know, the things around them. And as someone who can't be in the mountains all the time or out on an adventure, this is almost like bringing a little adventure home with you. If you want to learn more about the Feather Snap camera, go to feathersnapcam.com. That's feathersnap, S-N-A-P, cam, C-A-M.com, where you can learn more about their cameras and open up your own window to the wild. Hey folks, this episode is brought to you by, well, the state of Colorado. If you didn't know, this show was born and raised in Colorado. So many of our guests and stories take place there. So many of my adventures take place there. And we hope these episodes inspire you to seek an exciting trip of your own this summer in the beautiful state of Colorado. I was just there in Aspen, went hiking. It was absolutely breathtaking. And the mountains get a lot of attention, but there's culinary adventures, outdoor adventures, entertainment and scenic outdoor venues from music festivals and film festivals and all sorts of festivals. The state has it all. Experience the thrill of mountain biking along riverside trails or hop aboard a train for a railroad adventure. It has charming mountain and historic towns and cities, historic hotels, dude ranches, and like I said before, amazing cuisine, Michelin star level dining. And on those chilly summer nights, relax in one of the hot springs. Let Colorado awaken your spirit of adventure and explore all the possibilities that the state has to offer at visitcolorado.com and uncover the magic and start planning your getaway today. Visitcolorado.com. That is plenty of that for now. Let's get back into the episode. Were there any others that were maybe ahead of their time with how they viewed the relationship between Sherpas and mountaineers? Anyone that said this is, you know, just as much of an achievement, if not more so, for the folks supporting this climb versus those that are essentially funding it and being sometimes literally carried on the backs of these Sherpas?
Mm-hmm. Well, one person who I think I could see, and again, I know him personally, so it helps, Sir Chris Bonington, a British climber, who led a lot of big expeditions in the 70s to the Himalaya. So he led an expedition to the south face of Annapurna, the southwest face of Everest, and a lot of other expeditions. And it's interesting because I think if you look, and he's written a lot, so you have something to refer to and sort of see his evolution as an expedition leader. And as he sort of evolved and I guess matured as an expedition leader, at the same time, the people that he hired, in almost exclusively Nepali climbers, the people that he hired were also becoming better climbers, better trained, better equipment, and more skilled. And when, for example, when he was on Everest in 1975, the Southwest Face, he actually asked Perkemba Sherpa, he asked him for advice on certain things, and actually even some of what Perkemba told him was in conflict with what some of his other team members were suggesting. And Chris, at that point, went with Perkemba. Like he believed that Perkemba had the experience and the local knowledge to make the right call. And that was kind of interesting to see just how he relied so heavily on a local climber to make that happen. And, you know, and the reward was that Perkemba got a chance at the summit, which he got.
We often hear those supporting these expeditions, the Sherpas really are in the background, humble, meek. Were there any advocates or anybody that was particularly boisterous in trying to make this more fair from that side? Or was it truly, you know, just against culture, against their way of life, against the attitudes that they share? Was there any Sherpas that stood out?
Mm-hmm. Certainly, I know that our sort of traditional vision, I guess, vision of Sherpas is, you know, these wonderfully happy, cooperative, supportive, loyal people who are just a joy to meet and spend time with in the mountains. But I mean, there are all kinds of Americans, there are all kinds of Canadians, and there are all kinds of Sherpas. And certainly I would say that in more recent times, the Sherpa culture is evolving as well, and they are certainly becoming more aware of their value. I would say at the moment, they are very aware of their value. And I think one of the leading people in that role at the moment is Mingmaji Sherpa. He's a professional. I mean, part of what's been happening in Nepal is the training programs have evolved to the point where these guys, not all guys, these climbers are trained to the highest level, the UIAGM level, which is International Mountain Guide Standard. So it means they can guide anywhere in the world. And Mingmaji was an early convert to that. So he is an accredited guide, and he has his own company. He ensures that when he and his team, his professional team, guide an expedition, a client, they all get credit. It isn't just the client who gets credit. And he's also really careful to provide decent salaries for his employees, and insurance. And insurance is so important because it doesn't matter how trained you are, it doesn't matter how good you are, there's always the possibility of an accident, right? I mean, it is climbing, and it's high altitude climbing, and there's a lot of pressure. So insurance is important, whether it's life insurance or accident insurance. And again, he's so professional about how he does that. And so I think he's a really good example of the way it should be done.
What was maybe, as you came across this, it might have been something we've already mentioned, but one of the more surprising realizations, maybe it was a way a situation was handled, or surprising realizations. I mean, maybe it was the way a situation was handled, or the way a story had been told for years that was completely fabricated or untrue. Was there anything that really just knocked your socks off in understanding? It might have been a lot of things, but is there anything that stands out?
Mm-hmm. Well, you probably heard about this or read about it. I mean, it's quite a few years back now, but the incident that happened on Everest when there was the confrontation between a group of Sherpas and some foreign climbers. And the foreign climbers were Uli Steck from Switzerland, Simone Moro from Italy. They were training on the Lhotse face, but they were planning to do something that was, very futuristic. And they weren't hiring Sherpas to assist them. It was just the two of them with this very ambitious plan. But they had to acclimatize and they had to train. So that's why they were on the Lhotse face. At the same time, there was a group of professional Sherpas who were fixing lines for clients who were at Camp 2 acclimatizing in preparation for the next day. They were planning to go up. And what happened was there had been an understanding, at least it seemed like there was an understanding that nobody would be on the face that day because the Sherpas were busy fixing lines. And both Simone and Uli Steck did go on the face. They weren't using the lines, they weren't using ropes, they were just free climbing and they were, as I say, acclimatizing and training. And as a result, there was some ice that fell. No, there's definitely disagreement about where that ice came from. But bottom line, there was a confrontation between Simone and Uli and the fixers, the line fixers. And when everybody got back down to Camp 2, there was a confrontation. It was a violent confrontation, stones being thrown and some physical contact. And as a result, I think everybody was shocked. It was like, oh my gosh, the Sherpas can be violent. And oh my gosh, the two foreigners, superstar climbers, had to, almost run for their lives and get off the mountain. So that was a very shocking incident. But when you talk to people on both sides, the feeling is that it was almost inevitable at some point because the resentment had been growing. The power imbalance was too big. Modern Sherpas don't feel like they should be treated like loyal servants. They're professionals, and they want to be treated that way. So it was a nasty incident, but in some respects, I think it kind of cleared the air.
A new era.
Yeah, it seemed like it kind of cleared the air.
When did you start seeing the shift from just total disregard for those who had helped to paying more attention to this? Was there an incident? Was there just a slow shift? I know it's not perfect and we're not completely there yet, but there are tons of improvements. When did you start noticing that?
I actually think, again, there's so many expeditions that you could, examine, and they're not all like the trend isn't consistent. But
yes.
when I started seeing some shifts, it was actually in the 70s when big foreign expeditions started. I mean, they always hired local climbers, of course, but it was in the 70s that they started hiring locals, not just to carry stuff, not just to break trail, not just to cook and set up tents, but to actually climb and to make decisions. There were a number of I mentioned Chris Bonington, British leader, but also the big Yugoslavian team on Everest West Ridge Direct. There were other examples where local climbers were, part of the summit teams now, and they were actually, out front making decisions and breaking trail and fixing lines and that kind of thing.
So that early, and it's taken that long as I was growing up, in the 90s and 2000s, it was still this just cavalier Westerner attitude was kind of the stereotype for those doing big mountaineering expeditions. And, maybe a lot of that's still sticking around, but I feel like it was very recent, just as a casual observer and someone that has, a handful of conversations about it a year. It seems like it's way more recent than that, but maybe it hasn't, like you said, it hasn't been a perfect trajectory.
Yeah, it definitely wasn't perfect. And of course I was particularly interested in those expeditions because they illustrated examples of local climbers who were actually, getting a fair shake out of the deal. But also I think the other thing we all kind of have to remember is that everything seems more recent because we're hearing about it more. I mean, back in those days, you read about an expedition from maybe one or two or three different sources. But now, I mean, we hear about it live.
It can be live streamed from the summit.
It's live streamed. Yeah, it's totally live streamed. So it's a different thing altogether now.
That is wild. As someone that's written so much, a dozen books about, a lot of these topics, and this book was revisiting a lot of stories you've told and examples you've researched and talked about and written about over the years. Did this at all change the way you viewed this sport you love and this culture you love, or was it something you knew was there that you needed to be written about? How did it change the way you viewed just mountaineering?
Well, at least two other books that I wrote were written because I felt that a particular group of people weren't recognized adequately. The book about Polish climbers and the book about Slovenian climbers were both motivated by this feeling that here is a group of climbers that were so good, and they were so adventuresome, and they were so innovative and futuristic and creative in the way they were approaching the high mountains. And yet, at least, I'm in North America and I'm Canadian. At least in North America, we just really I didn't think we knew enough about them, and we didn't acknowledge their accomplishments adequately. And in a way, this most recent book is motivated by that reason as well. So I don't know if it's changed my attitude towards mountaineering. I mean, I guess it's a little more shocking than some of the other stories that I've told because of the power imbalance that has existed for so long between Western climbers and local climbers from Pakistan and Nepal. So yeah, the stories are definitely more shocking. Yeah, that's a result of colonialism, isn't it? I mean, it's how we've approached so many things in the world.
Probably, I mean, it absolutely is one of the probably the least atrocious things we've done.
Yeah.
It's pretty tame compared to some. However, it still deserves being addressed and changing. Speaking of change, what does the future look like? If you could say what has happened, where we are, and extrapolate that, where do you say the future's going with mountaineering culture?
Yeah, well, I think I would probably focus my answer to where I think it's going, in the high mountains, the Karakoram and the Himalaya, just because that's where my brain has been for the last 4 years.
Brain freeze.
Brain freeze, yeah. I think it's quite different in Pakistan than it is in Nepal. I think that what's happening in Nepal it's really interesting. It's kind of surprising. The Nepali climbers are not just feeling more confident in what they can do and they're taking control. They're super entrepreneurial. And so what they're doing is they are taking control of the whole business. Now, that doesn't mean that, there are independent climbers going to Nepal, to the high mountains and doing independent projects. But if you look at it as a whole, the mountains in Nepal are kind of turning into really big business. And the people who are driving that business are the Nepali climbers. Not exclusively, but by far, most of the companies who are guiding in Nepal now are owned and operated by Nepali climbers. And they're taking it to a level that I'm not sure any of us could have anticipated. And again, you can't generalize because they're all different, but there are some companies that are flying their clients with helicopters to Camp 2 so that they can spend less time on the mountain. They're using oxygen from Camp 2 so that they really don't have to acclimatize. I mean, they're providing, fresh vegetables and fruit at base camp and, dance parties and flying in. It's
movie theaters. I've heard movie theaters, hair dryers, all kinds of stuff.
Yeah. So it's definitely turning into a very lucrative business situation. Now, what's happening in Pakistan on a much smaller scale, some of this is happening, but it's not necessarily benefiting, if you want to call it benefiting, the Pakistani climbers, because for the most part, they don't own the companies that are doing the guiding. They're still doing quite a lot of the work. They're still working on the mountains, but they're not getting the same pay and they're not getting the same recognition that the Nepali climbers are. And there are all kinds of reasons for that, some of which have to do with training. The training situation in Pakistan is probably 20 years behind, or at least 15 years behind that which exists in Nepal. And that makes a huge difference. But yeah, it's kind of all over the map.
We talked recently with Will Cockrell. Are you familiar with him? Out of Seattle, who wrote Everest Inc. and talked about the business of the Himalayas over the years and how much it's changed. And he said the same thing. Like, you're really seeing this shift of this total ownership of the mountaineering expeditions and culture and companies to being right there in-house. And his view is it's a very good shift just because it's their land, it's their mountains, their ownership of the future of it. There's a sense of pride. How has been the experience shift for your typical Westerner trying to go climb some of these mountains? What do these changes mean for them? Is price lower? Is it higher? Is it, it's a more equal representation, sounds like. So what are some of those changes someone would experience?
I think it depends whether you're going over as a client or as a climber. If you're going as an independent climber, what I'm hearing is that it's you really have to, it depends who you talk to, but some of the people that I know who go to the high mountains to climb say that's why I go in winter, because summer it's completely finished. It's full of tourists. I don't mean trekkers. it's full of climbing tourists, and it's too controlled, and you have to follow all these rules. So I'll go in winter. Of course, I'm thinking now of, again, that niche group. But if you're going to the high mountains as an independent climber, you definitely are probably going to avoid the 8,000 meter peaks, or particularly you're going to avoid the normal routes. If you're going to the high mountains as a client, so someone who would like to climb Manaslu or Makalu or K2, the opportunities are much greater now because there are so many companies who are guiding them. It's not, I wouldn't say it's cheaper. I mean, you can find a cheaper alternative, but you probably wouldn't do that. It's not cheaper. It's faster. It's way faster because of the way they're guiding. So you don't have to have, a 6-week holiday. You don't even need a 4-week holiday.
Yeah. What are those timelines looking like now?
Oh, in some cases it's 2 weeks, base camp to base camp.
Wow.
Isn't that incredible?
It's wild.
I mean, it kind of defeats the purpose, right? It seems like, if you want to go to the mountains, you probably want to spend some time there.
Yeah. So some of there's an efficiency. It's like the economies of scale too. So I can imagine it would be, maybe more and more accessible. And that is something we talk about on the show a lot, is not disregarding short amount of times to have adventures. You can have really important adventures. However, there are some adventures. I don't want people to be able to do Everest over the weekend. That seems just like a stretch. But not saying that that's even physically possible. But that's one of those adventures that I do think, just for the sacredness and the challenge, should require certain elements. And one of those is time.
Yeah. Well, I couldn't agree more, but it is really interesting to see how that time frame just keeps getting smaller and smaller and smaller. I mean, all you have to do is look at what's happening with with guiding business, and not just in Nepal, but also in Pakistan, where clients are hiring a company to do 3 or 4 8,000 meter peaks in a season. So, and this is very common now. So the first one might take 2 weeks, but then you fly to the next one and the next one and the next one. And within a 3.5, 4 week period, you have climbed for 8,000 meter peaks. And this is future, it seems. This is not the future. This is the present.
Who is climbing these mountains now? How have you noticed that shift?
Well, I think, if you're talking about, clients, and it's still a very expensive thing to do. That hasn't changed. I mean, if you want to go and climb an 8,000 meter peak with a guide, you need to have some pretty serious cash. I don't think you need to have as much time. So I suppose that saves you money. I mean, if you're a professional, you only need to take a couple of weeks off work instead of an entire month or 6 weeks. It seems like you don't have to be as skilled, because the standard routes on the high mountains are pretty much, for the most part, laced with fixed ropes. So what you have to be able to do is, get your crampons on, theoretically get them off at the next camp. You need to be able to clip into a fixed line and move your body and you still have to go up, but because of the use of the excessive use of oxygen, it's not like you're really climbing at 8,000 meters. The use of oxygen from camps 2 and 3 upwards does change that. So I guess less skill, an equal amount of money, less time, and ambition.
What else besides, the overlooking of these unsung heroes over the years did you discover through this story? Was there any other element or any other angle that might be a future work or a future thread to follow? Any other discovery that you made?
Well, one of the kind of fun discoveries, I guess, was that a lot of the people and these are, contemporary climbers from Nepal and Pakistan, a lot of them have aspirations that are completely removed from guiding and working in the mountains. Obviously, that's what they do for a living, and that's absolutely important. because, that's how they make a living. That's how they feed their families. It's how they educate their kids, which is the number one motivation from everyone, I think, that I talk to. If not their kids, their sisters and their brothers, educating their families is number one motivation. But a lot of them have climbing aspirations that have nothing to do with 8,000 meters, but that have to do with, unclimbed peaks, new routes, ice climbing, rock climbing, technical climbing. They're climbers. They're not just mountain workers. They're not just guides. They have climbing aspirations of their own. And what's been kind of fun is to watch. Not that many of them have been able to carve out the time and the opportunities for them to go and do independent climbs, but some of them have, and some of them are, and it's good to see, because those are their dreams.
That's exciting. So it sounds like the future is going to have, like anything else, a mix of pros and cons, but it does sound like at the very least the issues that you're addressing and kind of surfacing with Alpine Rising, that's improving, to say the least.
Oh, there's absolutely no question. I mean, the situation that exists today, particularly in Nepal, less so in Pakistan, is that local climbers are in charge.
Wow. And we'll see what that looks like, in 10, 20,
exactly.
30 years. And I'm sure you'll be writing about it then. Has this story caused you to look at your own life and look at other aspects of maybe adventures or sports or just culture and say, man, who are the unsung heroes around me? I mean, it has to have an effect on you. Did you start viewing everything through this lens, or do you keep it pretty separate with your writing world?
Well, no, I mean, I do keep it pretty separate, but there are lots of other unsung heroes out there. That's for sure. I mean, I've often thought that, the Basque climbing community particularly is that particular group of climbers is kind of unsung. There are climbers from Slovakia that are not well known at all here, who have done amazing things. There are lots of unsung heroes. There just aren't enough hours of the day to write about them all.
Well, if you could boil maybe Alpine Rising down to one takeaway, one understanding for folks that read it, what is something that you hope they walk away with? And we're going to encourage everybody to check it out, of course, and read it. But what is something for folks that might interest them that they'll walk away with as a lesson?
Well, I think, we're all, I think most of us who read mountaineering books are aware of the highest mountains in the world. I mean, Everest is obviously the one that is most well known. For now, I hear in about 100,000 years, it won't be the highest, but we'll see. Right, exactly. And we're going into the summer season now, which is the Karakoram climbing season. So K2 and Broad Peak and all those peaks. If people come away with anything from this book, I hope that it is the realization and the appreciation for the local climbers who in the past made it happen and today still make it happen. They're getting a lot more recognition. They're getting paid better. There are all kinds of things that have improved for local climbers. But I think we always have to keep in mind that they are the ones that are making it happen in the mountains in their own countries, which is the way it should be. And we just need to acknowledge that. It's a really unique circumstance. I don't know if there's any other aspect of adventure where you have such a highly skilled group of people willing to do so much for so little for so long. It seems like quite an outlier in this world of adventure sports, honestly. And I'm just racking my brain of what other scenarios exist out there like this. But I think this is, as Everest is the highest, I think this might be the largest example of this anywhere in the world. So, well, thank you for bringing it to light. What has been some feedback so far? Have you received anything of
achieving this mission?
Yeah, most of the feedback I've had is it's the sort of, wow, how come it took so long for something like this to be written?
Buy the book.
I don't know. I was busy writing other stuff. No. And also, just to be clear, there are lots of other people who have written about a particular mountain or a particular person, or they have written about it themselves in different ways. So this is not the first, but I think it's the first example trying to pull together the entire story up to now. The historical aspect, the evolution throughout the decades, and what's happening now. And so, it's kind of an overall perspective.
Yeah, this will be a great resource to point anybody to say, what has been the history of all this? Well, go to Alpine Rising. And I love the name too. Where'd the name come from?
Oh, these names, they come from discussion, negotiation. A book title is always a very complex thing.
Yes, we just titled a movie at my day job a film, and it was thought we had it about 5 times, and then you end up in trademark searches and legal review, and it's just like, oh my gosh, okay, it's nothing that I thought it was going to be.
I know. Well, it was the same thing. I mean, I think every book that I've ever written, it's like you start off with a working title, and then, then the working title gets sort of massaged a little bit, and then it gets thrown out altogether, and then part of it comes back. But that's kind of what happened here. And the cover, the design was okay, now I'm spacing. Jeremy Collins. I don't know if you're familiar with his artwork, but he's kind of a brilliant mountaineering artist. And I was so happy when he agreed to do it, because I didn't want to have. I mean, most mountaineering books are photos, right? Like a beautiful photograph. And I didn't want the cover to be a particular person, like an individual, because I didn't want to single anybody out. And I also didn't want to have something that didn't have a person, because this is about people. Of all the books that I've written, this is focusing on people. And so, we went with Jeremy Collins, and he created something that I think is really beautiful, kind of a climber looking up at a peak, Alpine Rising.
Awesome. Well, thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mason. Thanks for having me on.
First of all, thank you so much for listening. It means the world to us that you choose to listen to this show. If you'd like to help us further, you can leave a review on iTunes, share us with your friends, your family. It goes a long way to growing the show. You can also support us financially through patreon.com/adventuresportspodcast. Link is in the show notes. And also, if you have an idea of who could be a good guest for the show, we're always looking for people to tell their story about the outdoors or adventure. So if you know someone, please reach out. Email us at info@adventuresportspodcast.com. And until then, get out there and have some fun.